And here with me in studio to talk all things data centers, we have Representative McNeely of R-Iredell County. Next to him is Tim Profeta, Founding Director at the Nicholas Institute for Energy, Environment, and Sustainability at Duke University. And finally, Nick Jimenez, Senior Attorney at the Southern Environmental Law Center. Gentlemen, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, sir.
Pleasure.
Tim, I want to start with you. Let's talk about these data centers. Why are we seeing such unprecedented demand for these facilities?
Well, we're really in a transformational moment right now, David. Like every day, the projections for the amount of build out we're seeing and the amount of energy we need to power them is going upwards. And it's really because of the amount of investment that's going into artificial intelligence and what it's doing for the productivity of our economy and our country and our national security. There's really pretty much bipartisan interest in getting, in sort of winning the AI race, but that requires us to build out data centers at a very fast speed, and that creates a lot of resource constraints, a lot of local concern. So we have to somehow find a way to balance all those things.
And how do these differ from, because data centers aren't new, they've been around North Carolina for quite some time. Are these, how are these different than some of the other ones?
Well, the AI products are using learning models, and they are constantly, let's just say, churning and having their models learn and become more intelligent and more able to provide the services that AI provides. And so they run at a much, they're just bigger. They require a great deal more power. Even like a year ago, we were talking about data centers at like 200, 300 megawatt size. Now we're talking at gigawatts, the size of small cities that just the data center's power demand would be.
Representative, do you see these as economic opportunities, infrastructure challenges, maybe a little bit of both?
Well, there's pros and cons with everything. Most of the time, they're looking for 200-300 acres minimum. So to find that, a lot of times you're going to eat up some farmland, more likely. And I'm in agriculture, and so we have a little cringe to that. But when you look at it from a county perspective, and usually municipality that runs water, sewer to it, it's a boom. I mean, with us, they're going to build one in R-Iredell County near Statesville, and the projected build-out's going to be about $5 billion. Wow. And we have a very low tax rate in the county, but that's still going to bring in around $25 million more tax revenue a year and not really ask for a lot. To a point, ask for power maybe, but far as what you need from the government, county and municipality, not a lot at all. Maybe some water, they'll have to supply. So I think there's great opportunity, but with everything that comes, there's concerns about what you give up to achieve these opportunities. And so loss of farmland, we're already number 2 in the nation in loss of farmland. The more data centers we probably get, the more farmland we'll lose, it looks like. But yet we'll still build an infrastructure that's going to take us into the future with AI like it is. We can't be the state that says, nah, we're good. We don't need them. We just got to be able to place them in good spots. And we've talked about this at the General Assembly, and right now we're not sure if we need to interfere into what the county municipalities are doing, let them kind of vet it out. If we do anything, it might be trying to help push them to some of our Tier 1 counties. And for people that don't understand the tier system in North Carolina, this is going to be some of what we can say is poor counties. Don't have a lot of taxable base. Therefore, their tax rate's high. This may allow them to be able to build schools and to build jails and sheriff's offices and EMS and whatever without taxing their people more or borrowing more. So, there's a lot of pluses, but there's negatives too. I think, like I talked to these gentlemen earlier, I think the worst thing you can be is that county beside the county. You get all the negatives and you get none of the positives. So, who's going to be the last guy that doesn't have a data center that's going to be built in North Carolina? That's the fear.
Yeah, a lot of communities weighing those pros and cons. Yeah. Nick, I'm curious, from a consumer point of view, what concerns you, if anything, about just how rapid this growth is happening?
So I focus in my work mostly on energy, and that's the way that I see the data centers showing up. Tim mentioned that they can take as much power as a small city. That's certainly right. At least the new AI data centers that we're seeing. We don't really have them in the state yet, but they're trying to come. And in North Carolina, just to kind of level set a little bit, we have a regulated monopoly utility structure. In most of the state, that's Duke Energy. If you get your power, you get it from Duke. And when the utility sees these large load customers like data centers coming on, and it says, oh, we need to build some stuff to be able to serve their electric needs, as part of that system, we all are going to pay for it. And so from a consumer perspective, what I'm worried about is seeing these data centers coming in. They might bring tax revenue, to the counties where they land, but the cost of the grid to serve them, and it could be quite a lot, is going to be socialized. Unless we're very careful, it's going to be socialized to all the rest of us customers. And we're already seeing, across the state. I'm sure you all have heard from it, from your constituents or seen it yourselves. Our bills going up. And that's even before we see this wave of infrastructure building to serve the data centers.
Representative, on the theme of money, you all passed a bill last session that in part helped change some of the cost allocation as a result to these data centers. What did you hope that bill would accomplish? What was kind of the problem it was solving?
I assume it was the Senate bill that helped re-regulate, what I'll call it, our power industry here in the state. We had done one previous to that. Duke Energy and some of the other players, but they're always the main player, had come to us 4 years ago, possibly 5, and it was a House bill, and I was a little bit more involved in it. And it put some, I thought, pretty stringent regulations as far as emissions and stuff like that. This one kind of backed some of those off and made it a longer term, which is going to allow Duke and the other energy suppliers time to maybe kind of figure out this thing without having the I don't know if even overburden's the word, but the other elephant in the room of emissions. So this gives them a little breathing room till they can figure out how they're going to power these AI data centers without having to say, okay, how are we going to do it with maybe like one arm tied behind our back? And so I thought that was good at the time. That was the biggest thing I saw coming out of that, is allowing them to have a little more area to manipulate and figure out. Because I think without that, we were doomed, and still probably are, but definitely doomed to see a huge spike in our cost of energy in the state. So this kind of spreads it out some. Still have emissions goals to set, but they're farther out on the horizon. So hopefully with that, Duke can figure out new plants, whatever they're doing to generate power efficiently, but hopefully, better for the environment too. And that's one of the fears that we see with the data center. What does it do environmentally? I'm not sure. I don't think really anybody is just yet. They're so new to the game. We don't have a 20-year look back that says, oh, it caused this problem, or it was fine and we had no problem. So this is a steep learning curve because they're coming quick. They're coming very quick.
Yep.
And Tim, help us understand what infrastructure is actually required to help power some of these new facilities.
Absolutely, and I just to speak a little bit to the energy affordability and the sustainability challenge. I think we have to look at the data center as both a risk and an opportunity. We have data center developers, the companies, particularly what they call the hyperscalers, the big 5 AI companies coming in. They all have two things. They want the social license to build, so they want to make sure that they don't raise people's rates, that they can, and Microsoft has recently in particular put out a series of principles that says we will carry the cost of the infrastructure for our data centers. We will not allow it to go to your average ratepayer. And if there are ways that our utility commission and our regulators can sort of ring fence the cost of data center to the big company and not let it bleed out to the ratepayers, I think we should pursue as a state. Those companies also have sustainability objectives. They all have zero carbon commitments, pretty aggressive. So they want clean energy. So we also want to build those structures to allow Duke to build the things that the market wants, which is things that don't emit greenhouse gases. And so there's an opportunity there that really could allow us to build a clean, modern, 21st century grid on the backs of the biggest checkbooks in the country, which are these big companies, and do it in a way that brings benefits to North Carolina citizens. If we don't do that, in a thoughtful way, though, however, there's a risk that there's going to be a rush. There's a risk that the counties will race against each other down to the bottom and create environmental harms and create rate paying increase. And then we're going to have actually a lot of pushback against the data centers. The infrastructure they need electrons. They need more power and they need firm power. They need the power that's always available to them. So they need, to use our grid and probably build out more wires to the data centers to get the power to them when it's needed. They'll probably need to build more generating assets, things that will generate the electrons, whether they be solar and storage or gas with carbon capture or nuclear. Those are sort of the conversations. And then they do need to use water to cool, and I think water is underappreciated environmental impact as well, that most of them are using water to cool. They may be going towards more closed loop systems, but we're seeing water stress in other regions of the country from data centers as well. And so we need to find a way that we both ring-fence that cost to the data center owners, and we also minimize those impacts and try and drive the investment towards the clean and affordable things we want in the state.
And Nick, help me understand from a community point of view. I mean, that tax revenue sounds pretty nice, but a lot of these smaller rural communities may not have access to the infrastructure needs in order to run these facilities. What's kind of that balance look like?
Glad to. If I could first piggyback on what
Sure.
Tim was just saying about what gets built, because I think we can look to what Duke's plan is for what it's going to build. And so that's one of the things I work on at SCLC is Duke's long-term resource plan, representing nonprofits. And it's planning to build a lot of methane gas generating plants, like giant methane generators. So I think there's that answer right there, and we're seeing, if you just take a kind of simple view of we have a lot of load coming on, and we're building these methane plants, you have this kind of technology of the future, we're told, that's being powered by this kind of energy of the past. There's a reason to do that. It's a kind of a simpler way to meet new load. In terms of what infrastructure communities, from the data center developers that I've spoken with, they're really looking for lower cost land. That's why we're seeing this in North Carolina now. The data center boom was first in Virginia. It's still the largest data center hub in the world. Then it kind of moved to around Atlanta, and we're seeing it kind of close the gap. And so we're seeing a lot of interest in development here for the structural reasons that Tim identified earlier. There's this boom in AI. There's tons of money behind these companies. But why is it coming here? It's because we're kind of filling that gap, and we have relatively low cost land, relatively low cost power, for now anyway, and fiber. That's the other main thing they need. So when you find those places where those things, kind of
Not
combine.
to mention universities too that are STEM related that's going to help supply these with what little, they don't do a lot of employment, but what they do, they highly technical, and we have that. We're blessed.
I hope they do take advantage of that,
Yeah.
for sure.
Tim, you want to hop in?
Yeah, I just wanted to, there's one opportunity we really haven't talked about, and this stems from some research we did at Duke University. I think most people don't realize this, but we build our grid to that coldest day in the winter, that hottest day in the summer. On your average day, we use in the Carolinas between like 50 to 55% of the grid, and 45% of it's just not being used. So if we could actually ask these new loads, we call the large loads, the big data centers that come in, to just not draw power 20 hours out of the year, we can justify plugging a lot more of them in without actually having to build new infrastructure. And that's an opportunity that's really come to the fore. And it will require some state policy. It will require some work by our utility commission, by our policymakers, to design the right incentive structure. But we can use what we built already to power this for, say, the next 5 years. And in that way, we can. That's the quickest thing to build is the thing you don't have to build. And so we could probably, grab the opportunity that all these data centers offer us without even really having to build a new infrastructure. And I think we really need to lead the nation in that sort of approach.
Representative, any appetite to address this topic in the upcoming legislative session?
Well, short session is always difficult because it should have happened already, and now we're just dragging it to the next part. But there probably will be talk. I feel like it'll probably end up going back into the next long session. and then there'll be some proposals, because this is not something we just want to, just do off the cuff. I think there needs to be a lot of thought put into this, and at the end of the day, you try to find that sweet spot if you're government and you're trying to be the best government you can, to where either everybody leaves the room happy or everybody leaves the room mad. One of the two. There's no middle ground. But you find where that is, and hopefully we'll make some, I hope, wise decisions, but we'll take our time and think this out, because if we're going to try to start doing the roadmap now, and a lot of the people are already driving down the road that we hadn't actually built because there's no legislation, so we need to move quickly, but not so quick that we mishandle this.
Important to get it right. Gentlemen, we appreciate you sharing insight on this topic. Thanks for coming by, and appreciate your perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you at home for watching and engaging. I'm David Hurst. Thanks for watching State Lines, and we'll be sure to see you next time.